Welcome to KXAN News Today. The Texas Department of Public Safety needing your help identifying this woman. She died after a car hit her on McAngus Road in Del Valley on New Year's Day. Police say she's a Hispanic woman about 20 years old, last seen outside a liquor depot on Pierce Lane.
And we do expect an update from Austin Police at 10:30 this morning when it comes to a homicide on Manor Road yesterday. We know someone called 911 over concerns that there was a body in an apartment parking lot. That person died at the scene. And in other news, 4 people are now without a home after a house fire that happened last night. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Sally Hernandez.
And I'm Tom Miller. This home was in Southeast Austin on Riverside Farms Road, south of Riverside Drive. Popular area. Firefighters getting there around 8:30 last night. Well, everyone was able to get out and escape these flames unscathed. You can see just how bad it was. That home now a total loss.
Samuel Grayhorse says that he and his family were using space heaters and there was a fireplace to stay warm during the cold night. But he says after the fire, they're still going to be okay.
This is not something that you wish on anybody, and it's unbelievable how the universe works, but we're going to be okay. Everybody came out safe, and the fire department came out here, and it's devastating.
Yes, some fire stain at the scene to make sure that the fire did not reignite, to put out any kind of hot spots.
If you don't recognize him by name, you've likely seen Grayhorse around Austin. You see this. He often dresses up as Santa, rides a horse or a mule around town at Christmas time. This is video from 2022. Brings a lot of smiles to people's faces. He started doing this about 13 years ago, and he is also a touring artist.
Our KXAN viewers have been sending in pictures of the ice covering parts of the hill country. Now, this can make for some really slick spots for you if you're driving in that area today, especially on the bridges, of course, and the elevated surfaces. So really cool pictures of the ice that you see right there on the tree limbs. Pretty to look at, but not pretty to drive on, I'm sure.
No, we're also keeping track of school delays and closures, many in the hill country. School districts with 2-hour delays today include Harper, Fredericksburg, Mason, and Cherokee ISDs. Also Doss CCSD, that school district, all of those closed today. Oh, I should say Lomita, Richland Springs, and San Saba ISD all closed today. So the ice having an impact. Rainy here in the heart of Central Texas, ice in the hill country. Up in Fort Worth, Dallas, we're seeing snow. A very active weather day yesterday.
Yeah. It's on its way out. That's the good news, is we're done with the bulk of the storm. Let me show you what it looks like on radar here, because it's possible we see a few flurries or sprinkles out of some leftover showers, but no accumulation, no immediate impacts here as this storm system is on its way out. As far as what's left behind, we do have some wet roadways. You'll notice we even have some raindrops still stuck to the camera there out at Allied Medical Emergency Room in Bastrop. So take it easy on the speeds. Not seeing any sort of widespread icing issues here in the metro or eastern counties. It's just going to be in spots out towards the hill country. Everybody in the 30s, we are closer to the freezing mark in the hill country, which again is where some of that concern plays in. But temperatures today going to be warmer than yesterday, relatively speaking. We're still chilly in those 40s. And on top of that, we've got gusty winds. So the wind chill is going to be a player in today's forecast. But overall, things are slowly improving. And that starts with the dry conditions and the temperatures. We do anticipate a hard freeze tonight, though. I'm going to show you how low we go, plus your weekend forecast. All those details will be coming up in your first morning forecast.
You're talking about how pretty it was and how snowy it was over in North Texas. Look at that, a blanket of snow, a mixture of freezing rain and snow continuing overnight as well.
Yeah, it looks pretty, but it's a concern for drivers. Big safety concern for state leaders, those road conditions, the winter weather making both the major highways and neighborhood roads slippery and slushy. The governor warning people to drive slowly. Many in Texas not used to these kind of driving conditions. Told the grid has enough power supply to service the state. And there's one man we talked to who lived through that 2021 winter freeze who says this year it is a lot better.
At this point, you know what I'm saying, we're prepared for it now, you know what I'm saying? We're very, very much got prepared for it this time around.
You know, that is thanks in part to TxDOT, who was out there before this storm. They brought in crews as well from South Texas to help them out. They brought them in from the DFW area, and that was just to help prep the roads for all of the crowds. With the Cotton Bowl, there is going to be a lot of people who are traveling, a lot of traffic today. The National Weather Service said the driving conditions will be at its worst this morning, so be extra careful if you are planning to drive to the game later on today. Let's give you a live look at the current conditions of another emergency that's happening and unfolding in California. It's the wildfires in the Los Angeles area. As we take a live look of the area, the winds continue to be a huge problem for crews trying to put out the fires, which just keep reigniting one after another. Thousands evacuated, 180,000 evacuated in the California fires.
And here's what we know. There are at least 5 fires burning right now, including a new one that police are investigating as arson. Officials confirming at least 10 people are now dead, at least. But officials say the real number unknown at this time. Personal drones getting in the way for firefighters, and officers are also dealing with looters. President Joe Biden weighing in, saying the federal response here includes covering all of the costs from cleanup, protection, and cash assistance for nearly 6 months. The largest wildfire, the Palisades fire, more than 24 square miles. For comparison, that single fire is larger than Manhattan, New York.
Wow. Let's go in depth on this, because a lot of the images that you've been seeing this week from the fires may make you wonder, you know, gosh, how can I help? So many people in danger, so many people lost their homes. Well, on KXAN.com right now, we're going to let you know where you can go to help. We have a list of links. You can make donations to help the California families who have found themselves suddenly without anything. We've also provided links that you can use to support emergency responders and wildlife organizations. And if you do have your phone with you this morning and you're watching and you're listening on the podcast, you could get this on our website. It's the QR code. It's on your screen right now as well. The Red Cross has activated this fundraising page. It's to benefit the victims. We also have a link to this on KXAN.com, as I mentioned, if you're listening on the podcast. I'm sure a little goes a long way. Well, it is a race against the clock for TikTok as a potential ban heads to the Supreme Court later on today, according to Wall Street Journal. Popular video sharing app, which has garnered a whole lot of attention and millions of users in America, could disappear from app stores 9 days from today. Today, TikTok will present its case before the Supreme Court justices as it tries to delay a law requiring the app to cut ties with its Chinese parent company or face that U.S. ban.
Meantime, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is suing that social media company. According to Paxton, TikTok falsely represented that the presence of graphic videos depicting drugs, nudity, alcohol, and profanity was infrequent and mild. However, he says an investigation found a virtually endless stream of videos on these topics, easily accessible to minors.
A catastrophe at a rail crossing in Kyle prompted the Texas Department of Transportation to close a road until midday today.
I want to show you some video here. Kyle police say Wednesday night, look at this, that driver hit a utility pole near RM 150, and you see the aftermath there. They say caused some power lines to fall. Right after, another vehicle hit those lines and flipped over. Then fast forward 10 minutes later, there's a passenger train moving through, and that collides with that car there. You see some of the infrastructure starting to tumble. You see some of the lights going out. No serious injuries reported as a result of this, though, which is miraculous.
Yeah, as you look at the video that you were describing, investigators are telling us the 25-year-old man who hit the pole was charged with DWI. Union Pacific is going to make repairs within the next few days when it comes to that train.
This is KXAN Sports, brought to you by Thomas J. Henry.
Game day here, Longhorns and Ohio State Buckeyes Cotton Bowl Classic. More than 20 years since Chris Sims and Roy Williams beat Nick Saban and LSU. Not nearly on the line that day at the Cotton Bowl as tonight at AT&T Stadium. Longhorns and Buckeyes, and for this Texas team all season long, they have been favorites. But as Steve Sarkisian and Ryan Day met with the media for one final time on Thursday, well, the script has flipped a bit. Texas, of course, in that quarterfinal matchup had to basically come back from the dead against Arizona State. That raised a few eyebrows. Longhorns heavy favorites, and Ohio State's run roughshod over their last two opponents in the college football playoff. So Sark ready to acknowledge but not make it a big deal with his team about being an underdog.
Our job is to put forth the maximum effort with great attention to detail to make sure we're right in the mental frame of mind to compete and then ultimately perform, and to perform in those critical moments. And so we don't really talk that way, but again, human nature is human nature. You can't sit and think that our guys aren't sitting around and looking at Twitter, because that's what our guys do. When they get on the bus, they pull out their phones like everybody else does. And so they hear that, but we don't really speak that way. But I do think human nature is human nature.
Certainly the way that Texas won the game last week, there's momentum there. The bottom line is this game is going to be played, and the team that plays the best and executes the best is going to win the game. And so there's a lot of opinions out there, I'm sure, of what everyone's going to expect, but ultimately it's going to come down to the players on the field and how they play.
And we're going to get you ready for it on Texas Game Day, KBVO 5:30 later today, the official pregame show for Texas football. Of course, the winner of this one headed back to Atlanta. For the Longhorns, that would be 3 trips in the last month plus. And if they get there, they will face Notre Dame for the national championship. Fighting Irish beat Penn State last night. Jaden Greathouse, the former Westlake Chaparral, with the game-tying fourth-quarter touchdown, a late interception by Penn State, and a Notre Dame field goal with seconds to go. Think about this. The day Notre Dame or Texas beat Michigan in Ann Arbor, that night Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, and here they are playing for the national title. Once again, we'll have full coverage throughout the day from Arlington. Back to you.
He's giving me a little bit of anxiety. The game hasn't even happened. But last night's game was pretty intense. All right, ahead of the Cotton Bowl game, so many people are heading over to Arlington, and we did talk to a Longhorn fan who said, I'm not driving in this. So she canceled her trip because of the icy roads. The weather, she says, was so bad, the decision was not easy.
Right? Like, we know this is going to be a good game. We were so excited, and we definitely had the passion behind us as diehard Longhorn fans, which fueled us to purchase the tickets in the first place. So the decision to not go was just as agonizing. But regardless, I feel so grateful that we get to watch from the safety of our homes, and hopefully we'll be able to fly safely to the national championship in a few weeks.
Great perspective, Audrey. So if all goes well tonight, she and the other Longhorn fans, of course, going to be able to travel to Atlanta, at least to see the University of Texas play Notre Dame in the championship game on Monday, January 20th, if they win, right?
If they
okay,
win.
let me
Cut before the horse.
Yeah, I'm reading it and I'm saying, wait.
You're not the only one who's talking that way. I mean, there's some Longhorns that I know too who are sort of have that same approach.
Put it in the universe?
They're like, well, do we really want to go up to snowy Arlington? We already got our flights booked to Georgia. Certainly thinking ahead.
Yeah,
certainly
for sure.
Ahead.
And I love Audrey's perspective, like you said, how she's very positive about it. But you know your own comfort when it comes to driving these conditions.
Totally.
So whether or not you listen to anybody or any advice, it's up to you. And I think the fact that she's happy with her decision makes me even happier.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's good to have a little experience. You don't want this to be your first time as you're driving to a national semifinal.
Especially with your family too.
Right.
Yes.
Sports are stressful enough, right? You don't want the ride up there to be just as stressful. Let me show you what's going on here, because there is obviously a lot of concern about what those roads look like up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm not seeing any issues getting out of Central Texas. At this point, I think it's going to be closer to the city, but Arlington picked up about 1 to 2 inches of snow. The heavier snow was certainly on the northern side of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro. So I will be keeping a very close eye on those conditions. But you know what? I don't blame Audrey. I think that's a very safe call, and the game's going to look the same from the couch, right? It's just a matter of rooting on the home team. Temperatures this morning are in the 20s and 30s, but look at your wind chill. If you were walking out the door and getting the kids ready for school, bundle them up, parents, because temperatures are going to struggle all day. Yes, we do warm to the 40s, but that 44 is just what the thermometers are going to read. It's going to feel much colder with those gusty winds. And I'm not going to completely discount maybe a little bit of a mist, a sprinkle, a flurry as we get into the later part of this morning, especially out in the hill country. But we're done with any sort of accumulating rainfall or accumulating ice. Did see some of that glaze in parts of the hill country yesterday. By this afternoon, a few breaks in the sun, but still a mostly cloudy sky before eventually we get some clearing getting into the later part of tonight. So let's talk about these winds. These winds out of the northwest will be noticeable. We're talking wind gusts up to about 30-35 miles per hour. So the fact that the temperatures are still going to be in those 30s and low 40s around lunchtime, you want to make sure you've got that heavy coat with you. We're still going to be fighting some gusty winds as we get into the afternoon. Tonight, a hard freeze. So Saturday morning, if you've got plans, you can expect those temperatures to be in the 20s still by the time we hit 6-7 a.m. tomorrow. So it's going to be a very cold start to the weekend, but we're going to rebound nicely. We get those 50s in here as we get into tomorrow afternoon, upper 50s to low 60s ahead of a dry cold front expected on Sunday. So we'll probably see a little bit more wind again late in the day on Sunday, but we will not be talking about any sort of rainfall this weekend. Nothing when it comes to an icing threat. For all intents and purposes, we're done with that. It's just kind of watching what gets left over from this storm as it clears. Just briefly, as we get into next week, Monday is looking dry with a mix of sun and clouds. Tuesday, a lot more cloud cover. Models is still a little bit uncertain as to whether or not we get some rain in here next week. I've dropped the rain chance for Wednesday, but I've included it on Thursday. It's only 10%. It's on my radar. Nothing to plan around just yet. So 7-day forecast, 44 degrees, gusty winds with that 10% chance of any leftover sprinkles or flurries this morning. But the bulk of it is done. By the way, if you're curious about those rainfall totals, if you go to KXAN.com, click the weather tab, and underneath you'll see rainfall amounts. That's a 24-hour total, and you could zoom it down to your neighborhood and such. We picked up anywhere from half an inch of rain to 2 inches, so right on track with those rainfall forecasts. Sunshine this weekend, mostly to partly cloudy skies heading into next week. Look at the temperatures, though. We don't get back to normal. We stay in those 50s. Not until middle of next week do we talk 60s again. Overnight lows hovering just above freezing for most nights. The exception would be tonight. Tom?
Thank you, Kristen. Yesterday, airlines canceling more than 1,600 flights in and out of Dallas airports. Crews have been de-icing the planes there and the runways. The sleet and snow, that changed plans for thousands of passengers. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport half empty as a result of this, but some flights were just delayed. They weren't canceled, and Christy Adams was on one of those. She eventually made it back to Las Vegas.
All of us were determining, should we leave or should we stay at the hotel? But the hotel's booked because of the football game that's supposed to happen, so we're hoping we're going to make it out.
And they did. If you're flying into Dallas or if you have a connecting flight through Dallas, you do want to be sure to arrive early. Double check if your flight is delayed or on time. We were already seeing some cancellations this morning.
A lot. Yep.
Yes. All right, well, outreach groups are frantically working to get some supplies to people who are experiencing homelessness in Austin. Many need that help if they're going to survive what has been a frigid cold stretch.
Yeah, it could be really dangerous. KXAN's Grace Reader explains how Austin is once again operating those overnight shelters, hoping to get people help.
Here's the rain, God.
Michael Evans is one of the thousands of Austinites.
See, stuff's all wet already.
Who sleeps outside.
No good.
He usually camps out near churches like this one.
But it's outside, so it's getting cold, so that's becoming a problem, you know.
This week, that problem reared its ugly head, and Thursday night,
no good.
Evans is likely to get the worst of it. Rain, he knows, does not mix well with sleeping outside in the cold.
If you don't have a sleeping bag, a tent, you could possibly really get hurt badly or die. So Like I said, I had an experience where I went to sleep and overnight it froze, and I didn't have my feet covered properly and almost got frostbite. I couldn't move my toes for 2 days, so very scary, very scary.
Austin Travis County EMS says they're very much on the lookout for that.
This is absolutely dangerous enough to be deadly.
And outreach groups like We Can Now are preparing to go out Thursday night to get people who don't go to shelter life-saving supplies.
The worst things we've seen here at We Can Now is fatalities, actually people passing away because of the weather conditions and no one got to them soon enough.
Those outreach groups could use your donations or your time. But at the very least, Evans asks that while you sit inside and watch this story right now, you remember that there are people who are much less fortunate.
There's a lot of real people out here, good individuals that just need help. Things happen in life, circumstances, and there's a lot of people out here. We're all people.
Grace Reader, KXAN News.
Coming up, we are taking a look in California at those fires and getting some new insight on just how big they've grown. If you're listening on the KXAN Today podcast, thanks for joining us. Hope you'll join us on air for that story, or you can find all our stories on our website, KXAN.com.